Logan Mercer thought he ran the place until one day he crossed the wrong girl. What followed? Nobody expected it. It all started with a look. Not the harmless kind you forget a second later, but the kind that stays with you. The kind that quietly says, you don't belong here. What do you think drives people to bully others? Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. 16-year-old Aria Bennett had been in Summit Ridge, Idaho for exactly 3 weeks, and she could already tell she was an outsider. She wasn't surprised. She and her father had moved around a lot because of his job, and she had long learned that some towns welcome new faces, while others made sure you knew you weren't one of them. Summit Ridge High was the latter. Aria walked through the hallways, her backpack slung over one shoulder, avoiding the stairs. Her dad had warned her about kids like Logan Mercer, the ones who thought they owned the school, the town, and everyone in it. She had hoped, just maybe, she'd go unnoticed. That hope lasted 2 days. On the third day, Logan made it clear she was his new target. It started with whispers when she passed by. Then his friends would laugh, just loud enough for her to hear. After that came the jokes, mocking her hair, her voice, the way she walked. She ignored it. She had learned that was the safest thing to do, but Logan didn't like being ignored. One afternoon, Aria sat in English class, scribbling notes as Mr. Carter, the teacher, droned on about the Great Gatsby. A sharp whisper cut through the room. "Hey, new girl!" She didn't look up. "I'm talking to you, Bennett." Still, she kept her eyes on her notebook, tightening her grip on her pen. Logan smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I just think it's funny. You know how some people show up where they're not wanted?" A few snickers. Aria forced herself to keep writing. "But hey," Logan continued, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Maybe you're just lost. I mean, a school like this, with people like us, must feel kinda different, huh?" Aria's chest tightened, but she said nothing. She had promised herself she wouldn't let people like him get to her. But Logan wasn't done. He leaned closer. "Hey, Bennett, you hear me? Or is it hard to hear over all that?" "Logan," Mr. Carter's voice cut in, sharp and impatient. "Do you have something to share with the class?" Logan leaned back, hands up in mock surrender. "No, sir, just welcoming the new student." Mr. Carter gave him a warning look, then turned back to the board. Logan shot Aria one last smirk before settling in his seat. She let out a quiet breath. Maybe that was it. Maybe he'd get bored. Maybe. A folded-up piece of paper landed on her desk. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. "Go back to where you came from." Aria's stomach dropped. She didn't react. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. She folded the paper and tucked it into her backpack, keeping her face blank as the lesson continued. But things were only getting started, because Logan Mercer didn't know who her father was, and soon he was going to find out. But before that, things were about to get a whole lot worse. Aria had learned to endure things like this. She'd lived in enough towns, walked through enough hallways, sat in enough classrooms to know. People like Logan always existed. But the thing about bullies, if you don't react, they just push harder. It was a Friday and the cafeteria was loud. Trays clattering, voices bouncing off the walls, the sharp scent of pizza and stale fries lingering in the air. Aria sat alone at a corner table, earbuds in, pretending she couldn't hear the whispers around her. Then she felt it. That presence. She looked up. Logan stood a few feet away, his hands stuffed in his Letterman jacket, his trademark smirk plastered across his face. Behind him, his friends, Ethan, Jace, and Bryce, stood watching, waiting. She had seen this before. Logan tilted his head. "You always eat alone?" Aria didn't answer. "You should really try to make some friends." He looked at her untouched tray, then at his friends. "Or maybe people just don't want to sit with you." Jace snickered. Ethan leaned in. "I think she likes being a loner." Logan took a step closer. "Or maybe she just doesn't belong here." Aria's fingers curled under the table. She didn't say anything, didn't move. Logan didn't like that. In one quick motion, he grabbed her tray and flipped it. The loud clatter of the plastic tray hitting the floor sent the whole cafeteria into silence. Food splattered across the tile. Mashed potatoes smeared across her sneakers. Milk spreading in a white pool. Gasps. Stifled laughter. Arya's hands clenched into fists. Logan's smirk widened. Oops. Arya stared at the mess, heat creeping up her neck. She felt everyone's eyes on her, waiting. Would she cry? Would she lash out? Would she... She pushed her chair back, slowly, calmly. She reached for a napkin, wiped her hands, and stood up. She wasn't going to give him what he wanted, but Logan wasn't done. As she turned to leave, he moved in front of her, blocking her path. Hey, where are you going? We're just getting to know each other. Arya took a slow breath. Move. The cafeteria held its breath. Logan's smirk flickered, just for a second. What was that? He asked, voice laced with amusement. She met his eyes. I said move. His friends laughed. Whoa. Ethan chuckled. She's got a mouth. Logan stepped closer, closing the space between them. Or what? Arya swallowed. She could feel her pulse in her ears. Her fingers twitched at her sides. And then, what the hell is going on here? A sharp voice cut through the cafeteria. Miss Alvarez, the assistant principal, strode toward them, her heels clicking against the tile. Her eyes darted between Arya and Logan, then down at the spilled food. Logan's smirk was gone. He took a step back, putting on an innocent face. Nothing, Miss Alvarez. Just a little accident. Miss Alvarez didn't look convinced. Her gaze flicked to Arya. Is that true? Arya hesitated. If she told the truth, nothing would change. Kids like Logan never got in trouble. She had seen this play out before. She glanced around. No one spoke up. No one defended her. She swallowed back the lump in her throat. Yeah, she muttered. It was an accident. Logan smiled. Ms. Alvarez exhaled. All right, get this cleaned up. And just like that, it was over, as Logan's friends snickered as they walked away, bumping shoulders. See you Monday, Bennett, Logan called over his shoulder. Arya stood there, staring at the mess on the floor. She thought about her dad, about how he always told her to stand up for herself. But what was the point when no one listened? She grabbed her backpack and walked out of the cafeteria. But this time, she wasn't just going to let it slide. The house was quiet when Arya got home. Too quiet. She dropped her backpack by the front door and slipped off her shoes, still speckled with mashed potatoes from lunch. She didn't even want to look at them. Arya, that you? Her father's voice came from the kitchen. Marcus Bennett wasn't the kind of man who missed details. As the newly appointed police chief of Summit Ridge, he had spent years reading people, picking up on things most wouldn't notice. Arya hesitated before answering. Yeah, it's me. She walked into the kitchen, where he was leaning against the counter, still in his uniform, a fresh cup of coffee in hand. His short-cropped hair was graying at the temples, his sharp brown eyes scanning her face before she could even sit down. You okay? He asked. She forced a shrug. Yeah. Chief Bennett took a slow sip of his coffee, still watching her. How was school? Arya slid into a chair at the table, running her fingers along a scratch in the wood. Fine. A pause. Then he set his coffee down. Try again. She exhaled. She should have known. She could never hide things from him. But part of her didn't even want to talk about it. What was the point? Nothing would change. Marcus folded his arms. Arya, she stared at the table, her voice quieter than she wanted it to be. Some kid dumped my lunch on me today. The words sat in the air between them. Her father didn't react right away. He was too controlled for that, but his eyes darkened just slightly, his jaw tightening. Who? Arya hesitated. She didn't want to give him the name. She didn't want him to march down to the school and make things worse. She had learned time and time again that calling out people like Logan Mercer only made them push harder. It doesn't matter, she muttered. Her father's voice was quiet but firm. It does. She sighed, rubbing her hands together. Logan Mercer. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Arya furrowed her brow. You know him? Her father was silent for a moment. Then he exhaled through his nose. I know his family, Arya scoffed. Of course you do. Marcus's fingers drummed against the counter. And the school? What did they do? She hesitated before answering. Nothing. That did it. His eyes sharpened. Nothing? She shook her head. Miss Alvarez showed up, asked if it was an accident. I said yes. Marcus frowned. Why? Arya met his gaze, frustration bubbling up. Because if I said the truth, nothing would have happened. You think they'd actually punish Logan Mercer? His dad's probably on the school board or something. Her father leaned forward, arms still crossed. And what message does that send? She blinked. What? When someone does something wrong, he said, his voice steady, and we let it slide. What message does that send? To them? To you? Arya didn't have an answer. He sighed, shaking his head. Arya, I get it. You don't want to make a scene, but letting things like this go, that's how people like him keep getting away with it. She clenched her jaw, looking away. I don't want to make it worse. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he walked over, resting a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to fight this alone. Arya swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to believe him, but she wasn't sure things could change. What she didn't know was that her father wasn't just going to let this slide, and tomorrow Logan Mercer was going to learn exactly who he had messed with. Monday morning felt different. Arya could tell the second she stepped out of her dad's car. There was a shift in the air, a ripple of whispers in the hallways. People were looking at her, not with the usual sneers or smirks, but with something else. Curiosity, unease. Something had changed. She barely made it to her locker before she got her answer. Dude, the police chief is here. Arya's stomach dropped. She turned toward the main office, and sure enough, there he was. Chief Marcus Bennett, standing tall in his uniform, his police badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His presence commanded attention, even from the teachers. Arya's pulse quickened. Oh my God, she muttered under her breath. Before she could even process what was happening, the office door swung open. Chief Bennett, I really don't see why this had to be taken so far. Arya froze. The voice belonged to Principal Dalton, a middle-aged man with a thinning hairline and a forced smile. Behind him stood Miss Alvarez and Logan Mercer's parents. Arya's breath hitched. Richard and Claudia Mercer looked exactly how she expected. Richard, a tall, broad-shouldered man in an expensive suit, had the look of someone who wasn't used to being questioned. Claudia, dressed in a beige cashmere sweater, clutched her designer purse like it was a shield. And then there was Logan. He stood beside them, his usual smirk replaced with something new. Confusion, like he didn't quite understand how things had gotten to this point. Chief Bennett didn't look at him. His gaze was locked on Principal Dalton. I took it this far, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm, because my daughter was publicly humiliated in your cafeteria, and your staff let it happen. Ms. Alvarez cleared her throat. With all due respect, Chief, No, Marcus cut her off. No excuses. You saw what happened, and you let her take the blame for it. Richard Mercer let out a short laugh, shaking his head. Chief, come on. They're kids. It was just a misunderstanding. Marcus finally turned to him. A misunderstanding? His voice didn't rise, but somehow it felt sharper, more dangerous. Your son targeted my daughter, bullied her, humiliated her in front of the entire school. Claudia gave an exasperated sigh. Chief Bennett, do you know how many times we get calls from the school over silly little things like this? Boys will be boys. Arya clenched her fists. Marcus didn't even blink. That's the problem, he said. People like you raise boys like him, and then you wonder why they grow up thinking they can get away with anything. Logan shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, he looked small. Principal Dalton forced another smile. Let's not escalate this. Maybe we can come to an agreement. No. Marcus's voice was steel. There's no agreement. There's accountability. A tense silence filled the office. Arya swallowed. She had never seen her father like this. Not as just her dad, but as Chief Bennett. Claudia glanced at her son, then sighed dramatically. Logan apologized. Logan's jaw clenched. Mom, now! Logan let out a slow breath, turning to Arya. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced with something else. Humiliation. Sorry, he muttered. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Louder. Logan's ears burned red. He grit his teeth. I'm sorry, he said, barely looking at her. Arya knew it wasn't genuine. She knew it didn't mean anything, but for once, he wasn't the one in control. Marcus turned back to Principal Dalton. "This isn't over," he said. "I want a full report filed, and if this school has any history of letting things like this slide, trust me, I'll find it." Richard Mercer's face hardened. "You don't want to make an enemy out of the wrong people, Chief." Marcus turned to him, eyes steady. "Neither do you." And with that, he walked out. But this was only the beginning. By lunch, the whole school was talking about what had happened in the office. Whispers followed Arya down the hallways. Some kids avoided looking at her. Others stared. A few even gave her something she hadn't expected. Nods of quiet approval. Logan, on the other hand, wasn't taking it well. She saw it in the way he stormed into the cafeteria, jaw tight, hands clenched into fists. His usual confidence had been replaced with something uglier. Anger, humiliation, frustration. Arya knew guys like him. They didn't like feeling powerless. And Logan Mercer wasn't about to let himself look weak in front of everyone. So when she walked past him to grab a tray, he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear, "Guess Daddy had to fight your battles for you, huh?" Arya froze. The cafeteria noise faded into the background. She turned slowly, meeting his glare. "What did you just say?" Logan took a step closer, a mocking sneer curling at his lips. "You heard me." His voice was low, sharp. "You think this makes you special? That people actually care about you? The second your dad gets transferred or fired or whatever, you're back to being nothing." Arya's pulse pounded. But this time, she wasn't just going to walk away. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin. "You're mad," she said simply. Logan blinked, caught off guard. "What?" She tilted her head. "You thought you'd get away with it, huh? Just like always. But for once, someone actually put you in your place." His sneer faltered. Arya took a step forward, closing the space between them. "That's why you're mad," she continued. "Because you know that no matter what you say, no matter how much you try to act tough, everyone saw what happened today." She leaned in just slightly. "And now? They don't respect you. They pity you." Logan's face turned red. "Shut up," she smiled. "Make me." For the first time, he was the one backing down. He clenched his jaw, fists shaking at his sides. But he didn't say another word. Instead, he turned and stormed out of the cafeteria, pushing past his friends. Arya exhaled, the adrenaline still pumping through her veins. She could feel the eyes on her. But for the first time since she moved here, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like the outsider. She felt seen. And as she picked up her tray and walked to her table, she realized something else. Logan Mercer might have thought he ruled this school, but that was over now, and he knew it. By the end of the day, it was clear. Things had changed. Arya felt it in the way people looked at her. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with something else. Respect. Some students still whispered, still stared, but they weren't laughing anymore. The ones who had once snickered at Logan's jokes now acted like they didn't even know him. And Logan, he kept his head down. Arya didn't need an apology. She didn't need him to admit he was wrong, because the truth was, he had already lost. The moment her father walked into that office, the moment the school had been forced to confront the truth. Logan's power had been taken from him, and without that, he was just another kid. At the end of the day, Arya climbed into her dad's car, shutting the door behind her. Marcus glanced at her. "How was school?" She hesitated. Then for the first time in weeks, she smiled. "Not bad." Her father smirked, pulling out of the parking lot. "See, I told you. People like Logan, they only have power if you give it to them." Arya exhaled, looking out the window. "Yeah, I get that now." A comfortable silence filled the car as they drove through town. Then Marcus spoke again. "You know, I didn't stand up for you because I thought you were weak." She frowned. "What?" He kept his eyes on the road. "I did it because I knew you weren't." Arya blinked. Marcus glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I just needed you to see it for yourself." Arya swallowed the lump in her throat, looking down at her hands. For so long she had felt powerless, like the only way to survive was to shrink, to disappear. But today she realized something important. Standing up for yourself isn't just about fighting back. It's about knowing your worth. And once you know that, no one can take it away from you. How many times do people like Logan get away with things? Because no one speaks up. Because people assume it won't change anything? Bullies thrive in silence. They count on it. But the second you take away their control, the second you refuse to be afraid, they lose their power. So don't let anyone tell you who you are. Don't let them define your worth. Because the moment you decide to stand tall, they can't push you down. And they never will. But don't just take my word for it. You have the power to rewrite your own story too. So if you're ready to stand tall and embrace your worth, join me in this journey. Let's grow stronger together. Subscribe now and start owning your power.